Fame, it can be dazzling, intoxicating, and cruel all at once. In Hollywood's golden age, these legends seemed untouchable, flawless faces on giant silver screens. But behind the beauty, the applause, and the lights were real people battling demons the public never saw. Some lost their health, others their minds, and a few, their very identities. Today, we're uncovering the heartbreaking stories of 11 Golden Age icons whose final years were marked by struggle and tragedy. And trust us, number 7 is unreal. 11. Peter Lorre, the haunted soul of Hollywood. Peter Lorre wasn't your typical matinee idol. With those bulging eyes, soft voice, and nervous energy, he became the face of the bizarre and mysterious, unforgettable in Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon. But fame came at a price. Lorre's haunting on-screen persona began to mirror his off-screen life. Years of morphine addiction, a habit that started after a painful surgery, slowly eroded his health. He was charming and witty, but plagued by insomnia and chronic pain. As roles dried up, Lorre's body ballooned, and the once iconic glint in his eyes turned hollow. By the 1960s, he was typecast as the creepy sidekick rather than the star. Despite brief resurgences, the audience could see it, the torment behind the smile. Peter Lorre passed away in 1964 at just 59, leaving behind a legacy of brilliance shadowed by inner agony. He showed the world that even the masters of mystery can't always escape their own darkness. 10. Gloria Grahame, the star who faded too soon. Sultry, magnetic, and dangerously alluring, Gloria Grahame embodied film noir's perfect femme fatale. In classics like The Big Heat and In a Lonely Place, she could freeze a man's heart with one glance. But Graham's off-screen life was pure chaos. Her obsession with beauty led to a series of disastrous plastic surgeries that distorted her once luminous features. Her personal life fared no better. Multiple failed marriages, including a scandalous relationship with her teenage stepson, destroyed her reputation in conservative 1950s Hollywood. In the end, Grahame fled to England, living modestly in hotels and small apartments, often pretending she was still the glamorous movie star she once was. She died in 1981 from cancer at just 57, performing in small theater shows until her final weeks. For a woman who once embodied sensual perfection, her final years were a heartbreaking reflection of how cruel the spotlight can be when it fades. 9. Edward G. Robinson, the tough guy with a tender heart. With his distinctive snarl and bulldog face, Edward G. Robinson was the original gangster. Unforgettable in Little Caesar and Key Largo. But beneath that tough guy image was an intellectual, sensitive man who spoke 7 languages and collected fine art. Robinson's downfall wasn't from scandal or addiction, but politics. During the McCarthy era, he was dragged before the House Un-American Activities Committee, accused of communist sympathies. Though he was cleared, the damage was done. Roles dried up, and the studios that once depended on him turned away. In his later years, Robinson was diagnosed with cancer but continued acting, even filming Soylent Green while gravely ill. Just days after completing it, he passed away in 1973. The Academy awarded him an honorary Oscar posthumously. He once said, "Fame lasts only as long as you can breathe it in." Edward G. Robinson breathed deeply until the very end. 8. Orson Welles, the genius who outgrew Hollywood. When Orson Welles burst onto the scene with Citizen Kane, he was only 25, a prodigy, a revolutionary, a man who seemed destined to reshape cinema forever. And for a time, he did. But Hollywood never forgave him for being too smart, too bold, too independent. Studio heads recut his films, canceled his projects, and branded him difficult. Over the years, his ambition turned to frustration, and his artistic fire burned him from within. By the 1970s, the once svelte genius had become almost unrecognizable, massive, bearded, living mostly in Europe, struggling to fund his projects through voiceovers and commercials. He joked about his weight, about being a fallen idol, but the sadness was clear. Orson Welles died in 1985, working on a script at his typewriter. His life proved that genius can be both a gift and a curse, especially when the world can't keep up. 7. Montgomery Clift, the beautiful tragedy. They called him the most beautiful man in Hollywood. Montgomery Clift wasn't just handsome, he was deep, vulnerable, and raw, redefining male emotion on screen, in a place in the sun, and from here to eternity. But behind those soft eyes lay profound insecurity and self-doubt. In 1956, a devastating car crash left his face disfigured. Rather than seek sympathy, Clift fought desperately to keep working, but pain, addiction, and depression followed him everywhere. Elizabeth Taylor's close friend once described his post-crash years as the longest suicide in Hollywood history. Pills and alcohol dulled his pain but stole his vitality. Once magnetic and gentle, Clift became withdrawn and haunted. He died alone in 1966 at just 45, leaving behind a legacy of brilliance and fragility. Number 7 truly is unreal, because few stars have ever burned so bright and fallen so fast. 6. Rita Hayworth, the love goddess lost in time. She was the dream of an entire generation. Rita Hayworth, the red-haired siren of Gilda, whose smile could melt the screen. But the woman behind the glamour was fragile and lonely. By her 40s, Hayworth began to forget lines, miss cues, and lash out in confusion. For years, people whispered that she was drinking again. In truth, she was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, long before the world even understood it. As her memory faded, so did her career. The public who once adored her beauty now pitted her decline. Her daughter, Yasmin Aga Khan, became her caretaker, watching her mother slip further into the fog. Rita Hayworth died in 1987, a symbol of beauty and the cruel toll of time. Her story reminded the world that even goddesses can grow lost in their own reflections. 5. Judy Garland, the girl who couldn't escape Oz. No one sparkled like Judy Garland. As Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, she sang of dreams beyond the rainbow, but her own dreams were poisoned by the very studio that made her famous. MGM forced her onto strict diets, handed her pills to stay thin and awake, and gave her sleeping tablets to rest. It was a brutal cycle that trapped her for life. Despite triumphs like A Star is Born and her legendary concerts, Garland could never outrun her addictions and heartbreaks. Bankruptcy, failed marriages, and emotional exhaustion wore her down. In her last interviews, her voice still carried that same fragile hope, but her body couldn't keep up. She died in 1969 at 47, her heart giving out after decades of overwork and medication. Judy Garland's tragedy is one of the most painful in Hollywood history, a reminder that even the brightest lights can burn themselves out. 4. Bette Davis, the Iron Ladyface's time. Few could match Bette Davis for fire and ferocity. With those eyes, those legendary, defiant eyes, she dominated Hollywood from the 1930s to the 1960s. But age, for Bette, was the one opponent she couldn't outact. As she grew older, she refused to fade, quietly, starring in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, a role that mirrored her own battle with aging and relevance. Then came a series of strokes and breast cancer. Her once commanding frame grew frail, her speech slurred. But her will never broke. She continued working, often joking about death, as if daring it to arrive. Bette Davis passed in 1989 at 81, her motto intact, getting old isn't for sissies. In her strength, she showed that even in decline, dignity can outshine despair. 3. Mickey Rooney, the eternal boy who couldn't grow up. For a time, Mickey Rooney was the biggest star in the world. As the lovable Andy Hardy, he embodied optimism and youth. But after World War II, audiences moved on, and Mickey didn't know how to follow. He married 8 times, gambled away fortunes, and struggled with alcoholism. His once cherubic face hardened into something weary and sad. In his later years, he revealed that he'd been financially abused by those closest to him, leaving him nearly penniless despite decades in show business. Yet even then, he kept performing in small roles, in nostalgic interviews on stage, as if he couldn't bear to stop. Mickey Rooney passed away in 2014 at 93, still chasing applause. His story is a bittersweet ode to the child star who never found peace outside the spotlight. 2. Janet Leigh, the Scream Queen's silent struggle. One shower scene made Janet Leigh immortal. Her terrified scream in Psycho is cinema legend, but it also trapped her. For years, she couldn't escape the shadow of Marion Crane. Behind her composed public image, Leigh battled intense anxiety and fear of travel. After Psycho, she avoided showers entirely, a phobia that lasted for life. Though she transitioned gracefully into motherhood and occasional roles, Hollywood's obsession with youth and novelty left her increasingly sidelined. In her final years, Janet lived quietly, writing books and supporting her daughter Jamie Lee Curtis, herself a horror legend. She passed in 2004, remembered not just for her scream, but for her grace in living beyond it. Her tragedy wasn't in scandal or illness, but in being forever defined by one terrifying moment that she could never quite escape. One, Mae West, the legend who wouldn't let go. She purred, she teased, she owned every room she walked into. Mae West was the embodiment of confidence, wit, and sensual power. Long before feminism had a name, she was living it on her own terms. But age didn't sit easily with Mae. Obsessed with youth, she surrounded herself with much younger men and refused to play older roles. She returned to film in her 80s, wearing platinum wigs and figure-hugging gowns, trying to recreate her 1930s persona. Audiences didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What had once been bold now seemed tragic, a woman trapped in her own legend. Yet Mae never apologized. Until her final days, she remained defiant, playful, and unapologetically herself. She died in 1980 at 87, leaving behind a legacy as both icon and cautionary tale. Mae West taught Hollywood one final lesson. You can deny time, but it always catches up.